Hey guys, it's Baban and I'm back with another speed draw thing, and we're doing another one of these to add to the set. I've also got speed draws of illustrations similar to this of Dangan 1 and 2, which I will put links to at the end along with links to prints. Anyway, here we go with this one. Right, now these kinds of illustrations are a really big pain in the behind because there is so much going on and so many characters and so many kind of things to try and get to work together. I've got the first two that I've done up in the right corner. They're kind of small, but you can see them. I am following the same kind of process that I did for those so that it kind of fits as a set. Now, the thing that I wanted to do with these was purposely try and cram everyone in so that we get a lot of character interaction, and I also want to be able to get a very interesting composition along with that. So I'm trying to work the character interactions around this composition that I'm going for. And you can see I've already got the Fibonacci spiral in there, which is what I'm basing the composition on, which is also what I've done in the other two. That allows me to have this kind of central point where everything curves in upon itself and there's a main point of focus, and it also gives me a big curve to put all the other characters onto. It was a really conscious decision in the first two to use this as a base so that I could work on my composition, especially with things with characters like I mentioned with the interactions and trying to get those to be interesting at the same time as kind of working as one single composition, and cramming everything into like a set space. And I think as I've gone through these, I did number 2 first and then number 1, and now I'm on number 3. I think they've gotten a little bit more interesting, and with this one I crammed the monocubs in as well so that there was a lot more going on, so it's a lot more tight and squishy than the other ones. Anyway, with this sketch that I've got on the go, I try and do it really kind of scruffy on the first go, just so I can mess about with the placements of the characters a little bit easier. I'll usually do it on a couple of different layers. So over on the left, we've got like one chunk of characters. This is on a new layer, where I've got all these characters that are a slightly darker colour at the moment. It just makes it a little bit easier when you've got so much overlapping going on to be able to draw things on a couple of different layers, so it's a bit easier to select around individual characters and move them about slightly. You'll see in a minute I kind of tweak this and pull it up and down and change the size of it so that it fits in the frame a little bit better, and I make a little bit more room for other characters to fit in, because honestly this is where like 99% of the work goes, trying to figure out the placements of everything, and the rest of it is just basically clean up. So at this point, the easier that I make it for me to change stuff, the easier it's going to be for me to make a decent design and not have it look like hell. It's going to be a little bit easier for me to not screw up when I'm trying to go and clean it up. And there we go, we're nearly done with it. Now, I wouldn't like to admit, but this took me a couple of hours to do because I'm very, very picky about where things go. Like, especially for the quality of it, it doesn't look like it should take that long, but like redrawing and like deleting stuff and redoing it to make sure that it fits right, moving stuff around, just to make sure that the composition works and, you know, everything's kind of interesting and interconnected, is definitely very, very taxing. Anyways, starting to clean it up now. I tried to make this a little bit more toony than the other ones. I think the other ones were slightly more anime, like Monokuma didn't look as interesting, he looks kind of boring, so I tried to tune him up a little bit more on this one. I actually gave him like feet instead of like tiny little nubs. I kind of made his proportions a bit different because I don't think the proportions are that appealing in the game. And I'm trying to fill out the forms on everyone else and make them look a bit more 3D than they do in the little scribble. Trying to figure out what kind of expressions. I'm trying to make this sketch like clean enough for me to do line art from, because I don't want to be wasting time redrawing this twice. If I'm doing something small, it's not as bad if you've got to redo the sketch a couple of times if you want to keep it quite loose, but I'm learning the merit, because I draw so many big complicated pieces like this. I'm learning the merit of being able to do a nice clean sketch after the original concept sketch, and then just be able to move on to the line art without having to go and redraw the whole thing any more than you need to. If I went and looked back at the speed draws of the previous two, then they likely wouldn't be this clean. So it's taken me a while to kind of be able to do a sketch this clean over the top of the concept. but it's well worth developing because, like I say, if you had to redraw this like multiple times, it's going to waste a whole lot of time. So it's well worth trying to focus on that so that you can produce cleaner sketches quicker rather than having to go and redraw things to clean them up. I think this part of the process takes me quite a while as well, just cleaning things up and making sure that I've got the designs of the characters correct from the references that I've got up the top. So I think that's mainly what takes a lot of the time in cleaning up the sketch, just making sure that it looks correct rather than actually figuring out all the proportions and everything, because I've already got those down with the concept sketch. Something that I was looking at on the previous two that I've done was that there's quite a lot of, or there isn't really enough character interaction. Like, everyone's squished in quite tightly, but nothing's really like making contact with each other, so I'm trying to include a little bit more of that in this one. So like Shuichi's face is being kind of like squashed and stuff, because Kaede is like pushing Monokuma into him. Like there's stuff going on down the bottom. I just want the characters to actually physically be interacting with each other rather than just looking around at each other or being like squished in next to each other. With the brushes that I use, people have kind of been asking about brushes quite a lot. I think that's quite a common question anyway. I'm not sure I want to do a video on it because it's not that interesting, but I tend to only really work with the default brushes unless I'm doing something quite complicated. But with stuff like this, I try to stick to things that are a bit more solid. I don't like to reduce the opacity on them because you get kind of a solid, like a weak line rather than something solid, so they're not that great to draw with. What I like to do is reduce the opacity of the layer that I'm drawing on so it doesn't look too dark, so it's a bit more like greyish, like a tiny bit less contrast, because it kind of hurts my eyes, and it's a bit easier to see the really light sketch underneath to draw over. The brush that I like to use on my Manga Studio 5 though is the Husky brush, like Bit Husky ink brush it's called. It's like India ink or something. I found that to be quite comfy. I used to use the chalk one, but it's a little bit too broken up and wispy for me. I prefer something a bit more solid, and this kind of has a bit of texture to it if you zoom in really far or if you draw in small. But it's kind of thick enough to create a definite line that you can't really be too cowardly with. So it's kind of still got a sketchy feel to it, but it's not as thick and strong and sharp as the pen brush. Oh, I kind of like how I drew Angie. I didn't really like her flat fringe. I thought it suited her better to have it kind of bouncy and rounded with like swirly bits. I kind of like her silly little face as well, with her eyes too close together. Another note on brushes though, I saw one video where someone used like basically an airbrush to draw, but they just made it really, really tiny, so it had a bit more kind of bulk to it, but it was so small that you couldn't really tell it was an airbrush. So I don't know, like try out different brushes to sketch with. I've found one that I like and I've kind of stuck to it because it suits my style. I don't think this would be great if you wanted to draw like a bit more realistically, but it works for my kind of toony style. For the rest of this, I think the only tool that I use is the pen, as well as a little bit of the airbrush just for gradients and like blush on the cheeks. So in the entirety of this, I'm only really using 3 brushes. I think I use like the line tool and the circle tool to get the detail over the top, just for framing it. But yeah, I am only using like 3 simple like preset brushes. I don't like to use anything fancy, especially for toony stuff like this. Kibo kind of looks like hell there. I saw his face out after. I wasn't really sure what to do with it, if I wanted him to look a bit more like people or a bit more like robots. Anyway, there we go. We have got the sketch done and we're on to the line art. Now, I kind of keep a few things quite blocky so that I can go and change the colour of the line art a bit later. So it's going to look a little bit dull for a while I do the lines. I'm also putting a layer over the top, which I'm sketching white onto so that I know little details that I need to add in that I don't necessarily want to have lines around them, so because it might make the colours look a bit muddy. So what I'm going to do is add them in on the colouring layer. I'm also adding a tiny little bit of line weight. I don't want to make it too thick because I want more of the focus for like shadows and things to be on the little bit of colour that I'm going to put on like underneath necks and stuff, and the little bit of shine that I'm going to put on hair with shadows and things, and underneath the eyebrows between the top of the eye I'm going to put a little bit of shadows. So we're going to have like small indications that there's like a certain light source, but I don't want it to be like super duper obvious, so we're not gonna go and play about with the line weights too much. I also like to, when I'm doing lines, kind of hop about in between different parts, so I won't always stay on one character and finish them off. I will go and change between different characters and fix any like little overlaps that are going on, so that I know that those are definite, like where we've got the arm overlapping here. Like sometimes it's a bit easier to go and do the awkward bits first that you know you're going to have trouble with or need like a little bit more zoom and detail on them, rather than the things that are a little bit more simple, like just drawing the hair. Now, I mentioned before that I'm going to go and change the colour of the line art to calm it down a little bit once I've got the base colours over the top, and some of the things I am making quite thick, like the eyebrows I am drawing over the top of the hair. And what I'm going to do later is go and put them in like a slightly darker hair colour so that they still show through, but it's as though the colour of them is kind of being influenced by the hair. So they are going to be visible through the hair, but like only just slightly. Speaking of hair, I really like Kokichi's hair. It's all like wormy and weird and kind of woo, like creepy, kind of I probably shouldn't say tentacly, that's going to incite something. I didn't mind Kokichi. only decent character. I was also a bit worried with this one that there wasn't really enough facial variation, like in the shapes in the face. I tried to give Gunter a massive chin, like a really big squared off chin, because I think a lot of the chins that I draw are either they come to a point or they're like rounded, like Samugi's is there. I've also noticed that I don't really squish and stretch very much, or like in the basic kind of shape of the face. I don't really exaggerate like the length or the width of them very much. I tend to concentrate more on like the shape of the eyes, the shape of the nose, kind of the point that the chin comes to, like where on the face the nose is, like how high or low. And it's starting to look a little bit samey, so since I've done this, I've kind of been trying to study that a little bit more and draw a bit more varied faces. I think they are already kind of varied in like relation to what most people draw, but they're not varied enough for my liking. They need to be a little bit more interesting. Compared to each other, like Gunter and Kokichi are obviously very different, like the faces are very different, but I don't think the shapes are quite appealing enough yet, or they're not like individual enough still for my liking. I'm quite picky. I'm gonna I've always kind of been against same face syndrome, like I really don't like it, and that's kind of why I like doing these, because in Danganronpa a lot of the faces look very, very similar. They all have same face apart from like maybe Sakura and Gonta, just because they're like huge, and like Nekomaru. But I kind of like to be able to draw all the other characters who have same face with a little bit of their own kind of personality to them. It sounds really, really bad, but like art that I don't like gets me more pumped up than art that I do like. Because if you can see how to fix something or make it a little bit more interesting, it kind of makes you more interested in wanting to do it. That's why I try and look at my old art a lot if I'm not very motivated, because it's kind of easy to see how you would fix stuff or how you would redo it. It's a really like easy motivator, because like looking at other people's art that's way better than yours and not being able to understand how they got there can be a little bit frustrating. So like if you need kind of a pick-me-up, like look at your own art and have a good laugh at it and then like do something that you know is better than it. It's such a slow thing to see progress in, but like if you've built up like a bunch of sketches and stuff, that's why you should keep a sketchbook, you can kind of see the progress throughout stuff. I think Ryota looks quite good as well. I'm quite pleased with how he turned out. I thought he might look a little bit out of place, just because he kind of does in Danganronpa anyway, because he's like one of the characters that they seem to like draw a little bit more simply than everyone else for some reason, but he kind of fits in decently to my style of everything, because mine's a little bit more cartoony anyway, so he fits in quite nice. I actually quite like the designs for the characters that are a bit more simple like that, like Teru Teru. I think they look really cute and a lot more appealing than the way the other characters look, because the style on them is a little bit more consistent. With everyone else, like the heads are really stylized, and then the bodies are like going towards slightly more realistic, especially in the painted panels, and that just doesn't jive well with me. Like, the style is inconsistent, but I think they do a decent job with the characters that have more gnarly faces, and the ones that are like overall more simplified, like Ryota and Teru Teru and Nekomaru and Gonta. Like, the art style has the potential to be nice if all aspects of it are consistent. We're getting a little bit closer to being nearly done now. I've just got this little corner with these two left. With Kibo, I decided to make him like a little bit more human, but I made him quite angular so that he looks a bit more robot-y. I wasn't sure whether to make him more like human looking or more robot, but I kind of went for a mid-ground where he's just kind of like human looking, but he's quite pointy, and he's gonna have quite pale skin anyway, so he's gonna look like he's got a bit of like an endoskeleton underneath. And that's what's giving him those crazy cute cheekbones. Okay, so that's done. You can see I've got like a big mess of little details over the top in white. I'm selecting around everything so that I've got a big block to fill in. I'm trying to keep as few like spaces around the side of everyone as possible, so that I'm not just having like big empty spaces. Some of them I'm going to go and fill in and add like other little details of characters underneath. I just want it to be a little bit in these little bits of shading. Now these are mostly colours that I'm trying to pick from other skin tones and colours that I've already got, but if I don't have one available, then I will go and pick like a new one, but mostly they're just like slightly pink tinted things. I put an overlay over the top to give it a bit more interest, closer towards having this finished. Now you can see all the colours are together, it's starting to look a little bit more consistent all over it. Adding a little bit of glow and like gradients over the top of it just to make it a bit more interesting, and putting highlights onto the hair. I tend to do it with glow. I have like one colour for shadows if I want shadows in it, or like just highlights if it's darker hair. And I also go and put like a little bit of shine over the top with a glow layer, and I'll kind of brush that on just with the sketchy brush that I use to get a little bit of texture for the strands of the hair. And over the top of that I will get the airbrush and just soften out one kind of end of it, so that it's a little bit softer as it's kind of transitioning into the rest of the hair. And now that I've got that done, I am starting to change the colour of the lines, and you'll see now how it goes from being quite kind of dark and muddy with all the black lines on it to being a little bit softer, especially in the faces and everything. I tend to make details that are like inside the outlines of the character a little bit lighter. On darker hair, sometimes I like to make the lines on it lighter than the hair itself, so that we can see like the defined edges of it a little bit easier. And where all the strands are going, introducing like a little bit more colour into some of them. You can see where the eyebrows are, like I mentioned, I'm making it like a slightly darker colour of the hair, so we can kind of see it through the hair, but it's not really, really dark and obnoxious. A little bit of glow onto everything as well, changing more line art colours. I tend to make the like details on the skin kind of a pinkish colour, and all the colours that I'm using for the lines on the skin are colours that I've pulled from the rest of it. Again, I'm still making sure to only use colours that I've already got in my palette at this point, unless I really need something that's like a bit stronger or that isn't quite the right colour for it. And there I go with those really, really strong highlights that I'm going to calm down in a second. I think that just makes it like a little bit more fun and sparkly. I don't know, I wasn't really into like really sparkly anime hair, but it's kind of fun. It's like way too much fun to colour these in with a load of sparkles and stuff. And the thing I leave for last is colouring in the eyes, and because they are just a block of the line art, just like one big lump of the same colour, I just put the transparency lock on and go and paint in the little details into them, like the colour and stuff, and it's super duper easy and it doesn't change the shape of them. And yeah, there we go, we're done. Thanks for watching. I hope this helped. If it did, give us a like, share if you think it'll help someone else, and subscribe for new videos on Fridays. I'll put links down in the description to the Discord group where you can come and chat art stuff with us. I will also put links to where you can get prints of this and other stuff that I've drawn and my commission information. There'll also be links to everywhere that I post stuff. And lastly, here are a few links to those videos that I mentioned of the Danganronpa 1 and 2 speed draws, as well as the Unified Colour Palette tutorial. I hope this helped. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.